Hello, and welcome to the Permission to Breathe podcast, a transformative space dedicated to providing a sanctuary where you can inhale deeply and exhale freely, embracing your grief journey unapologetically. I am your host, Dr. Tammy Isaac, here with you every Monday to offer comfort, guidance, and hope. Together we'll navigate this path, finding moments to pause, reflect, and breathe. Let's begin this journey side by side. Are you grieving and feel like you're struggling alone? You don't have to walk this path by yourself. Book a virtual session with Dr. Tammy Isaac at Breathe Grief Counseling Center. Visit us online at www.breathegriefcounselingcenter.com. Dr. Isaac will help you put your emotions into words. She'll help you reduce the feeling of isolation. She'll help you understand that everyone grieves differently, and also help you prevent unhealthy coping mechanisms. Take control of your life with world-class counseling sessions today with Dr. Tammy Isaac. Welcome back to the Permission to Breathe podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Tammy Isaac, and today we are closing out season 2 with a deeply important and tender conversation. This episode today is titled, When Grief and Suicide Collide. As we end this season, I want to honor the sacred, often silent spaces in our lives, the places where grief and loss feel overwhelming, especially when suicide touches our stories. Today, we'll explore how people respond to suicide, whether grief can lead someone to suicidal thoughts, how suicide grief is different from other types of grief, and how it emotionally impacts the survivors left behind. Grief and suicide are very heavy topics, but here in this space, you have permission to feel, to question, to breathe, and most importantly, to heal. And while season 2 wraps up today, I'm excited to share that Permission to Breathe will return with season 3 this July. But you won't have to wait too long to hear from me. In May, we'll have a special Mother's Day mini-series honoring the beautiful, complex journeys of motherhood through the lenses of grief, hope, and remembrance. So let's take a deep breath. Find a comfortable place, and let's walk through today's conversation together because you're not alone. Before we begin this sacred conversation, I want to first say, if you are in crisis, please know that help is available. You can call or text the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by simply dialing 988. It's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This lifeline provides free and confidential support to anyone in suicidal crisis or emotional distress. You don't have to walk through your crisis alone. Suicide is a major public health concern. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, suicide claimed the lives of more than 49,400 people in the United States alone in 2022. It was the 11th leading cause of death overall, and more alarmingly, the second leading cause of death among those ages 10 to 14 and 25 to 34. It was the third leading cause of death among ages 15 to 24, and it was the fourth leading cause of death for individuals between 35 and 44. For every suicide, there are many people who attempt it, and even more who silently live with suicidal ideations. And that is, whether thinking about it, considering it, or planning it. A suicide attempt is defined as a self-directed, potentially injurious act with intent to die, even if it does not result in death or injury. These numbers are heartbreaking, but they are also a call to action, a reminder that grief, trauma, and mental distress must be met with care,
compassion, and community.
When someone dies by suicide, the emotional response from those left behind can be overwhelming and very much complicated. Unlike other types of grief, suicide often shocks the system. It leaves loved ones wrestling not just with sorrow, but with 1,000 heavy, tangled emotions all at once. There's the shock. I can't believe this happened. There's the guilt. Was there something I missed? Could I have stopped it? There's the anger. How could they have left us like this? And there's the shame and stigma, the quiet fear of what people will say, how others will judge, or how their story will be remembered. For many, suicide grief feels like being trapped between sadness and blame, blaming themselves, blaming the situation, sometimes even blaming the person they lost. And woven through it all is a desperate search for answers. Why? Why didn't they reach out? Why didn't they stay? The truth is, suicide grief carries questions that often don't have clear answers. And that ambiguity can make the grief much heavier, more complicated, and sometimes even isolating. Now, if you are grieving the loss of someone to suicide today, I want to say this gently, but also firmly. You're not responsible for someone else's pain. You love them the best you knew how. Their story is not your fault. And you deserve compassion for them and for yourself. One of the most difficult truths we must confront is that grief itself, when deep, prolonged, and unsupported, can lead to suicidal thoughts. This is especially true when grief is compounded by trauma, isolation, mental health challenges, or a loss of identity or purpose. After a profound loss, some people begin to wonder, what's the point of going on? Or, I don't want to wake up tomorrow if it means living with this kind of pain. These thoughts may be passive, like wanting to disappear, or they may become active, involving specific plans or intentions to end one's life. Either way, they are very much serious and deserve immediate attention. It's also important to know that grief and depression, while different, they do often overlap. In grief, pain is typically tied to the loss itself. But in depression, the pain becomes more generalized, more pervasive. But when grief is prolonged and unresolved, it can absolutely evolve into a clinical depression or even into complicated grief, which is a type of grief that becomes debilitating over time. Grief can create a fog in the mind, a weariness in the body, and a heaviness in spirit that makes even the simplest tasks feel impossible. This emotional overload, if left unspoken and unsupported, can lead someone to consider suicide as a way to escape the pain. And that's why community matters, compassion matters, checking in matters. So if someone in your life is grieving and seem to be withdrawing, losing interest in life, or expressing thoughts like, I wish I could go to sleep and never wake up, please don't ignore that. Ask the question, are you thinking about hurting yourself? It might feel uncomfortable, but asking can sometimes save a life. And if that person is you, I want you to know something as well. There is no shame in feeling this way. You are not weak. You are just human. and you are loved even when it doesn't feel like it. You do not have to grieve in silence. There are safe spaces, there are open arms, and there are lifelines that are available to you where people are trained to listen, trained to support, ready to walk with you through whatever darkness that you are experiencing at this time. All grief is painful, but grief after a suicide loss is often called complicated grief because it brings layers of pain that can feel heavier, harder to talk about, and much harder to carry. When someone dies from an illness, an accident, or even old age, there's often a sense of closure. We can name what happened even when it hurts. But suicide often leaves survivors grappling with unanswered questions like, why did this happen? Why didn't they tell me? Wasn't my love enough? Guilt can settle deep into the heart, making survivors feel responsible for something they couldn't control. Anger often rises too. Anger at the person, anger at the situation, anger at the world that felt so hopeless to them that they couldn't stay. Shame and stigma can also isolate survivors. Some may feel judged by others or may even judge themselves, believing they could have or should have prevented the death. Sometimes survivors find themselves reliving the trauma, especially if they were the one who discovered the person or even witnessed the aftermath. This can cause deep emotional scars, including symptoms of post-traumatic stress. Another difference is silence. Many survivors of suicide loss find that friends, family, and even faith communities don't know what to say, or worse, they say things that are hurtful, whether intentional or not. I mean, this can lead survivors to feel isolated, abandoned, or even, you know, even or as if they must carry their grief in secret because nobody understands and everyone is being judgmental. I want you to hear me though. If you're walking this road, please know you don't have to carry this grief alone. There are support groups specifically for suicide loss survivors. There are counselors and chaplains like myself trained to walk alongside you. And there is space, even here, right now, for all the complicated emotions you're feeling without judgment and without shame. Understand your grief matters, your story matters, and your healing is possible even when it feels out of reach. One of the questions I often hear in my work is, am I losing my mind? Am I broken? When grief hits, especially after a traumatic or sudden loss like suicide, it can shape you emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and even physically. The simple answer is yes. Grief can make you feel emotionally unstable. But I want to immediately add that it doesn't mean you're unstable. Okay? It means you are grieving, and grieving is a full body, full heart experience. You might find yourself crying uncontrollably one minute and then feeling numb the next. You may be feeling angry without knowing exactly why. You could be struggling to concentrate and or even trying to remember things. Waking up in panic or feeling waves of sadness that seems to come out of nowhere. And also feeling detached from people, from work, from your normal, routine. And these are not signs of failure. They are signs that your mind, body, and spirit are trying to process a world that has been torn apart. Grief after suicide can especially disrupt your emotional stability because of the trauma, stigma, and complicated emotions layered into the loss. You may feel an urge to retreat from life completely, or you may try to stay busy to outrun the pain. Neither makes you wrong, right? It simply means you're trying to survive the storm of grief. In these moments, it's critical to have safe places and safe people. You need a counselor, a chaplain, a friend who listens without judgment, a support group for suicide survivors, because grief needs expression. It needs room to breathe. When we try to bottle it up, it doesn't just simply go away. It finds other ways to surface. And sometimes it surfaces through anxiety, depression, anger, or physical illnesses. So if you find yourself overwhelmed, feeling unstable, or struggling to cope, please know you are not broken. You are simply grieving, and there is help. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. Healing means learning how to live again, even with the scars. Today's episode is sponsored by Let the Church Grieve by Dr. T.I.M, a compelling book that explores the often overlooked subject of grief within spiritual communities. Dr. Isaac combines personal antidotes with theological insights, providing a compassionate framework for understanding and addressing grief collectively. This book emphasizes the need for spiritual leaders to create safe spaces for mourning and guides congregations through the grieving process with faith and empathy. It's a must-read for anyone looking to support those experiencing grief within their spiritual communities. Grab your copy of Let the Church Grieve at www.drtammyisaac.com today and begin the journey towards healing and growth. Now back to our show. Losing someone to suicide is like having your heart shattered and then being handed the pieces with no instructions on how to put them back together. Survivors of suicide loss often carry a heavy emotional burden that survivors of other types of loss. It's not just a grief of missing the person, it's the complexity of what surrounds their death. And as mentioned before, survivors experience that guilt, anger, shame, fear, and even isolation. But beyond the emotional weight, suicide loss also deeply affects a person's spirituality, the way they see God themselves and the world around them. Some survivors experience a crisis of faith. They may ask, where was God when this happened? If God is loving, why didn't he intervene? Does prayer even matter if my loved one still felt so alone? Others may feel angry at God, even if they're afraid to admit it out loud. Some may walk away from their faith for a season or forever because they feel abandoned, betrayed, or disillusioned. There's often a spiritual shame layered into suicide grief. Some survivors may wrestle with old teachings that frame suicide as an unforgivable sin, or feel torn between compassion for their loved one and fear about their eternal destiny. And for others, there's a sense of sacred confusion, a feeling of standing in the ashes of their beliefs, not sure what, if anything, is still true. I want to say this gently, but also clearly. It's okay to question. It's okay to wrestle. It's okay to doubt. Grief cracks open the deepest parts of us, not to destroy our faith, but sometimes to invite us into a deeper, more honest relationship with God. Faith after suicide loss may look different. It may feel raw. It may be full of silence, tears, anger, and desperate prayers, but it is still faith. And God's love is big enough to hold all of it: your sorrow, your questions, your rage, your aches. Healing spiritually after suicide loss is often about giving yourself permission to be honest with God and to trust that He can handle every messy, painful, sacred part of your heart. Some survivors find it helpful to seek spiritual counseling or pastoral care with someone trained in trauma and grief. Some people find it helpful to read the Psalms of Lament, which give voice to anger, sorrow, and unanswered questions. Some people join faith-based support groups where grief and mental health are honored and not stigmatized. Some people pray or meditate with no agenda other than showing up. And some just simply sit in the presence of God, even when words are impossible. So if suicide grief has shaken your faith, I want you to hear me clearly. You're not less spiritual because you hurt. You're not faithless because you have questions. And you are not alone in the dark night of your soul. The God who loved your loved one still loves you. The God who wept at Lazarus' grave still weeps with you. And even when you can't feel it, even when everything feels broken, you are still held. Before we move from this sacred moment, I want to speak a blessing over your heart, especially if you are grieving, questioning, or just trying to breathe through the weight of it all. May the God who sees in secret meet you in your silence. May the one who weeps with the broken draw near to your sorrow. May you know that your questions are not too heavy for heaven, and your pain is not invisible to the heart of God. May grace find you in the places no one else sees. May peace gently wrap around the edges of your ache. May you feel, if only for a moment, that you are not alone. You are loved, you are held, and even now, healing is making its way to you. In the name of the one who binds up the brokenhearted and restores shattered hope. Amen. As we close this sacred conversation in this powerful season of Permission to Breathe, I want to leave you with something that lives beyond this episode. You are still here. You are still breathing. You are still being held by grace, by God, by community, even when it doesn't feel like it. Grief and suicide are not just topics, they are lived experiences. And if you are living through the loss, the questions, or the darkness, I want to remind you your grief is not too much. Your emotions are not too messy. Your doubt does not disqualify you from love or from healing. You are allowed to fall apart. You are allowed to rebuild piece by sacred piece. In this season, we've covered some difficult terrain: grief, identity, emotional pain, spiritual struggles, and still we've made it here together. As we enter a brief pause before season 3 returns in July, I want you to know that you are not forgotten during this time. In May, we'll have a special Mother's Day series that honors both the beauty and the heartbreak of motherhood, because this space will always make room for joy, loss, memory, and healing. If today's episode brought up difficult feelings for you, I encourage you to reach out to a friend, to a faith leader, a counselor, or even to call the crisis hotline, the suicide and crisis hotline, by dialing 988. There is always someone who cares, always someone who is willing to listen. And finally, may this moment remind you to keep breathing, keep showing up for your life, even in the smallest ways, and keep giving yourself permission to feel, to rest, to heal, and to live. I'm Dr. Tammy Isaac, and thank you for being here, for listening, for grieving, for growing. I'll see you soon. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Permission to Breathe podcast. I hope today created space for you to breathe and find peace on your journey. I invite you to join me again next Monday for another episode as we continue to navigate this path together. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and to share the podcast. Until next time, take care and keep breathing unapologetically.